I don't know if you know who I am or not. Richard Seiersen, Chief Risk Technology Officer, serial recovering CISO, author, and all that. So that's me. Let's jump right into our topic. Is your CTEM money-minded? Unveiling a new approach to cybersecurity risk management. Mega platforms changing history, lives, and livelihoods. Gunpowder in the Renaissance was a mega platform. You may not know that. Yes, weaponry and warfare was impacted. Medicine, manufacturing, energy production, it really hastened the advent of the scientific revolution. So, what is our mega multi-generational platform right now? I think it's obvious. It's motherhood and apple pie, I suppose, to say that here. Artificial intelligence. If you don't believe me, $1 trillion of new investment in the last 5 years. It cannot be ignored. And what that means for you as practitioners is you need to evolve. We need to evolve in practices, platforms, and again, as practitioners. So my aim today is to convince you that you need, that we all need a new approach to cybersecurity risk management. One that's a scaled approach that scales to what's occurring with artificial intelligence. One that focuses on the risks that matter. This is my outline. We're going to talk about the money-minded practice of cybersecurity risk management, the data-driven model for modern cyber risk operations, and lastly, the Risk Operations Center, where platform, practice, and practitioner meet. So to our first topic, the money-minded practice. Don't write slogans, write truths. Do you know who said that? If you're an 80s person, that was Joe Strummer of The Clash. And that indeed is a slogan, and that is the truth. And it's a risk-inducing, loss-inducing truth that if you don't get, you will have problems. It leads to what Sun Tzu says right here. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. I want to give you an example of that. I was a chief risk officer for a leading cyber insurance company before I was previously a serial recovering CISO. Now I'm a recovering chief risk officer. And the second largest T provider in the world had bought insurance. They bought a whole tower of insurance. We were the base of that tower. When you're the base of the tower, what that means, if something bad happens, you're writing the first check. The CFO found out about me and invited me in because they're about to spend many millions of dollars on new security people, process, and technology. So I met with the CFO and the CISO. I showed up and I said, hey, CFO, why did you buy insurance? And he said, ransomware. I thought to myself, that makes sense. You're in the business of shipping leaves and twigs around the world to hundreds of thousands of stores. I said, great, ransomware. What about ransomware specifically? And he said, business disruption. Now that made sense to me. They're a logistics business. I said, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Tell me this. What's the longest amount of time you can go fully bricked, fully disrupted? Caesars, MGM, Marks and Spencer's level disrupted before you need to call your suppliers, before you need to call your customers, before you need to call your board and the media. The CFO and CISO turned to one another. They started talking. I overheard them say, well, we got a year's worth of leaves and twigs in the back room there. All right. CFO turns to me. He goes, we can go 3 to 6 months. I said, wait, you don't understand. What I said is everything is fully bricked. Computers not working. He goes, I know, I heard you. And then he got this look on his face. I call it sad CFO resting face. And I said, you get it. That is not a material risk for you. He goes, you're right. What do I do? And I said, well, good news. Insurance generalizes really well. Security investments, not so much. So we started talking about what their real value at risk was. They were shipping digitally millions and millions of records of PII out to third-party SaaS services in quadruplicate. Huge exposure. We were able to fix that, get them heading in the right direction. But the moral of the story is that's an example of tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. And we want to avoid that. All right, so how do we define risk? Sam Savage, Stanford professor, author of the great book, The Flaw of Averages, said, risk is in the eye of the beholder. Now that's a deep cut. We need to ladder up into that. let's look at what this book says. I don't know if you guys, how many people have read this book or are familiar with this book? A few of you. For those of you who don't know it, I am the co-author. I am not here to sell you my book. Everyone here, when I say here, everyone at Blackhat could buy a copy of my book, and I could take my family out once to Chipotle without chips. So I'm not here to sell you books. But this is how we define risk. Risk is a state of uncertainty where some of the possibilities lead to loss, catastrophe, or some other undesirable outcome. So here's a question I have for you, and for those of you who think deeply about this, you can come to our booth later and argue with me about this. Here's my question for you. If you eliminate uncertainty, have you eliminated risk? I'll ask you this again. If you have eliminated uncertainty, have you eliminated risk? I traveled the world speaking to CISOs this year alone, several thousand. 60% of the time, CISOs get this wrong every time. Another little quote for you guys. You caught that? All right. So what is risk management? Again, we turn to a classic book that was voted best in its weight class for pressing flowers. Right here. So risk management is the mitigation or transfer of losses that could plausibly impact business objectives. I'll say this again. Risk management is the mitigation or transfer of losses that could plausibly impact business objectives. For a keen listener in here, you're probably saying, Rich, where is risk acceptance? I think most of you as practitioners probably live the life of risk acceptance. Professor Ron Howard, not to be confused with that guy from Happy Days, Professor Ron Howard, the grandfather of decision science, again out of Stanford, said that risk acceptance as we practice it is called unstructured worry. Unstructured worry. It's like this. You go to your CTO, you go to your CIO, and he or she says, I accept that risk, and if something bad happens, someone else will pay for it, just not me. By the way, that is risk transfer. What they're saying is insurance will pay for it, capital reserves will pay for it, or we'll sell stock or fire people to pay for it. There's no such thing as risk acceptance. All right. So you will never have zero risk. You will never have zero risk. But you can eliminate the risks that matter most if you hold to the Latin derivation of the word eliminate, and who doesn't, right? So that word eliminate actually is ex limine. Ex limine. Ex means out. Limine means limit, right? So that's where we get our concept of insurance limit. Right? Your insurance limit, by the way, is a mathematically unambiguous, contractually obligating expression of your business's risk tolerance, defined typically by your CFO or your GC. So for those of you who think, gosh, we can't figure out what our risk appetite is, what our risk tolerance is, it's already been defined, and they've been defining it for generations before our field ever exists, both in terms of your insurance limit as well as your cash reserves. All right. So we, in security, must figure out what's most likely to cause financial loss. That's our job, to figure out what is most likely to cause financial intolerable losses to the business. If we don't do that, we treat everything equal, we get what Jonathan Troll, he's the CISO here at Qualys, a good friend of mine, he says this: if you're treating everything equal, basically, if everything is critical, nothing is critical. Right? You treat everything the same. And that leads to what Sun Tzu says right here. If he sends reinforcements everywhere, he will everywhere be weak. I'll say it again because it's so critical, because this is more often than not how we do security. If he sends reinforcements everywhere, he will everywhere be weak. All right? So how can we reduce that likelihood of catastrophic, intolerable loss? All right? Go back to our definition of risk management. Risk management is the mitigation or transfer of intolerable losses. The mitigation or transfer of intolerable losses. Mitigation reduces the likelihood of loss. Transfer reduces the likelihood of that impact being intolerable. Let's dive into this a little bit more. Risk management, okay, again, is about reducing the likelihood of major intolerable losses, right? Now, what do I say that? Your businesses, if you work for, I don't know how many of you work for a successful business. If you work for a successful business, that business is in the business of continually exposing more value to more people through more channels at higher velocities. I'll say it again. If you work for a successful digitally and AI transforming business, that business is in the business of exposing more value to more people through more channels at higher velocities with the hopes of more revenue and more profits, right? That thing they're exposing, that risk they're exposing is called your value at risk. That money they're exposing, that exposure is your value at risk. Value at risk is at the center of a thing we call your risk surface. And I'm going to decompose this for you. Value at risk is at the center of something we call your risk surface, right? Your job, I believe, particularly in light of AI and its scale, is to expand the aperture of your focus and what you do as practitioners beyond attack surface, now into something we call risk surface. Let me unpack that. 99.99% of the vendors that are here this week are focused on this area here. You have assets, right? Assets can have vulnerabilities. You apply controls. What's residual to that is what's exposed. Exposure, bad guys send angry packets at your exposure. They compromise, right? That's the game. Now, theoretically, there could be impact, but you only have actual impact if you have value at risk. And even if you have value, risk, and impact, it's what's residual to your risk transfer that creates real losses. All right. By the way, this area to the right here, value at risk and all, that's called the treasure zone. Who's interested in the treasure zone? Your CEO, your GC, your CFO, your board, and your investors. They are interested in the treasure zone. There's another august body that's very interested in the treasure zone. And I get some water here. The name of that group is called the bad guys. The bad guys are super interested in the treasure zone, as is your board. The group that the bad guys they want you to not be focused on that. They want you to stay focused on attack surface. They don't want you thinking about treasure. You must think about treasure. All right, so what creates this value at risk? It's what your business is trying to do. Your business strategy, there's an opportunity, market, there's an advantage, and there's their strategy enablement. So there's the solutions, AI and digitally transforming solutions and operations that expose value. Invariably, there'll be losses. My contention is this is the job of modern cybersecurity. This is where it lives. This is where we need to live. The thing is, this is where it's always been occurring. This is an observation of reality, but this is where I want to get our industry, where we want to get our industry focused on. All right, so I've talked about the money-minded practices. I've hammered that in. Now we're going to talk about the data-driven model for modern cyber risk operations. Just to be clear, again, hammered again, the only language of risk is money. But before we can speak the language of money, do we know the distinct assets we have and how they relate? Do you know all the nouns in your enterprise your business cares about? I'll say it again. Do you know all the nouns in your enterprise that your business cares about? That's the ephemeral ones and the solid state ones, the ones that change over time, the ones that stream in real time, the ones that map together just in real time. It's a data mesh or a data plane that undergirds everything. So do you know your infrastructure and physical assets, containers, storage, network, IoT, your software and code, SBOM, first-party code, commercial off-the-shelf software, apps, packages, digital assets, identity. Identity is an asset, right? It's one of your nouns, API, certain AI. Have you mapped all that together? Do you stream all that? Is it meshed and connected? All right? Before we speak the language again, do we know all of our risk factors? And do we know how they correlate effectively? The average enterprise, so Fortune 2000 plus, has 70 plus enterprise security products. 70 plus. Is all that telemetry that's coming in real time mapped to all the nouns, to the assets? This starts becoming a petabyte scale fabric, all right? Before we speak the language, can we layer risk factors with threat intelligence? I hosted a dinner on Monday night. We had the lead the guy who runs all the cyber analytics for the largest insurance broker in the world there. And he shared a nice fact, something that you probably already know. I asked him, hey, if you rank order all the things that are indicators of financial loss, that means claims. They have largest claims database. So if you rank order all the things that make a claim, what's the number one most highest factor or indicator of a claim? And he said, your business being talked about on the dark web. Now that's coming from the insurance guy, right? You've heard vendors say this. That's the number one most important factor, the highest correlation with you having financial loss, he said, within a year. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, it just means it's highly likely. So none of this matters if we can't orchestrate sentient and artificially intelligent response to risk at scale. I'll say that again. None of this matters if we cannot orchestrate sentient and artificially intelligent response to risk at scale. Why is that? We are involved in asymmetric warfare. on both sides, by the way, asymmetric warfare. So again, our budgets, by the way, are typically 5% of what the CTO and product and CIO are getting. We have tiny budgets, right? And they are in the business, again, of using digital and AI transformation to expose more value to more people through more channels, right? That's on one side. And then we have sentient and artificially enabled miscreants on the other side. And here we are in the middle. We have to get scale, right? So that leads to this, the Risk Operations Center. So again, money-minded, data-driven, now the Risk Operations Center, where platform, practice, and practitioner meet. All right, so we've all walked through, or all currently walking through the SOC exercise, right? Which was born out of triaging alerts, so responding to compromise, recovering from incidents, reacting to angry packets. Absolutely necessary, absolutely hard to scale, particularly now, hard to scale alone. So that's why there's a need for an operationalized process for cyber risk management. And that's why we're introducing the concept and practice of the Risk Operations Center, where knowledge becomes capability. By the way, that guy, Clausewitz, I don't know if you know him or not. If you served in our military, or actually in any major military around the world, and you were an officer, and you went to officer training, you would know Clausewitz, and you would have a tramp stamp of Clausewitz right here. Clausewitz was part of the team that defeated Napoleon at Waterloo, which more importantly led to a #1 song by ABBA, which they used to win Eurovision. Now you can go away from this saying, hey, I learned something, but you're going to learn something far more important, and that's this. We are releasing the world's first Risk Operations Center in the cloud, which we call Enterprise True Risk Management. And I'm going to decompose this for you right now, all right? So I've covered much of this already. Unified asset inventory. All of your nouns, your ephemeral and solid state nouns, how they change over time, and how they mesh together in real time. Risk factor aggregation, that's 70+ products and all their telemetry overlaid in this fabric. Threat intelligence, we have over 25+ real-time threat feeds integrated into this, including the dark web, which I just mentioned, lots of other information. Money-mindedness, the value that your business is exposing, bringing all of this together for risk prioritization, to rank order how you take action, all of that feeding into risk response orchestration, or the artificially intelligent and sentient informed actions. And that, of course, informing reporting, be it reporting to your board and into your auditors. So undergirding this, it looks like this. So we've got, over 20 products at Qualys, but we're bringing in new products every single day to our platform across a whole swath of vendors. Threat intelligence, I mentioned 25 feeds, and bidirectional integration with your CMDB. This is what's creating that undergirding, that mesh, right? This is what it looks like in real time. This is from a real engagement with a real customer, 62.5 million findings. Those are normalized findings, where we've already normalized all of your assets and where we've normalized all the findings coming across from all these products. Feeding that then into threat intelligence with a 96% reduction, 2.17 million findings. Feeding that then through risk prioritization, the money-minded concerns, getting down to 304,000 negligent, not to address findings. That's a massive reduction, okay? What do you do with that? You eliminate risk with or without patching. So True Risk Eliminate is integrated with the True Risk Operations Center. So reduce risk, reduce cost, remediate. That includes patching, either our patching or other vendor patching integration, mitigation, cloud exploitation, prevention, isolate, uninstall. Now the question then is, what about orchestration? How do you get scale then? What Blackhat talk would not be complete without agentic AI. Okay. So the purpose, by the way, of agentic AI is to scale you. Honestly, it's to remove the ditch digging from work, really. It's about operational efficiency, capital efficiency, and what we've done is we've developed an agent marketplace. And I do not want to steal the thunder from my folks who are presenting later and at our booth, but this is your skilled digital workforce for autonomous risk management. More importantly, how are we doing this? I don't know how many of you are familiar with MCP, Model Context Protocol. So we've got a lot of deterministic connectors already. They're feeding into our petabyte scale data lake. Now we're enabling the ability to have conversational, language-based discussion, not only with our data, but with others who are exposing MCP, right? And most of the major security vendors are. So this allows our agents to talk to each other through MCP, to talk to other SaaS data sources, and so it allows you as well as someone who's now going to evolve into an orchestrator of risk to be able to have natural language conversations and not only observe risk, but actually to take actions. What's the objective? The objective is this: moving your residual risk, your toxic residual risk, within appetite, within tolerance, relative to value at risk, operationally efficient, capitally efficient, artificially intelligent risk operations center. I'll explain this to you real quick. So what we've done is we decompose your enterprise in terms of your value at risk. So in this case, this is based on your revenue. This is business units based on revenue. The red is the residual risk. Our algorithms go through and determine what would be the best capitally and operationally efficient target for you, given your value at risk, given what you stand to lose. So this is a continuous process, right? So we're helping you manage, not just observe, but actually to buy down that risk automatically, right? So this is the function of the Risk Operations Center. This is what we're presenting. There's 2 more presentations today. This is what we're discussing at our booth. I will be there and happy to talk to you more. I've left 3 minutes and 31 seconds for anyone who has a question for me. Otherwise, I will fill the time with dad jokes. Any questions? Come to our booth and talk to us. For those of you who are lucky enough to be there when I'm there, I will also sign some books for you. All right? Thank you.